Let's look at a hypothetical situation here. Say you have to find out the minimum score from a list of scores for a student, and that list contains 4 scores, and there are 100 such students, which means there are 100 such lists, and you'll have to find the max from each list, and you'll have to do the computation 100 times. Let's say there are 4 scores. S1 is equal to 10, S2 is equal to 20, S3 is equal to 30, and S4 is equal to 40. Now what you'll have to do is you'll have to compare each value and find out the max. Let's declare a variable, say smax is equal to 0, and what you'll have to do is you'll have to say if S1 is greater than S2, store the value in smax of S1, else if S2 is greater than S1, smax should contain the value of S2, else if S3 is greater than S1, store the value of S3 in smax, and so on until you cover all the combinations of these scores. And you'll have to do this for all the 100 students, which would take, like, I don't know how much time, but a lot of effort. So here is where functions help us. What a function does is it does all this calculation for you by just taking in the minimal information, which in this case would be these scores. So let's look at how to work with functions. First, there's the definition of function, which says return type, function name, parameters that you'll have to give to the function, and the statements that you want to run. So what is the return type in our maximum function? The return type is int, because we are dealing with integer variables. The function name is myMax. The important thing here to notice is we cannot name our function max. Why is that so? Because there exists a function max in the C++ library already, and we cannot use the same name again. So I've named my function myMax. The parameters that I'm going to use are int, say v1 and int v2. To make it simple, I'm only going to use 2 variables, so it's easier for you to understand. And first what I'll do here is I'll declare this int smax inside, so that I can use this to return the value of my function. Now I'll do the computations here. I'll say if v1 is greater than v2, then smax will store the value of v1, else if v2 is greater than v1, I want smax to store the value of v2, and that's it. Notice that if v1 is greater than v2, then it would run this statement, and otherwise we only want this statement to run. So we basically do not require an else if statement here. Else can be used here, and at the end of this computation I want to return my smax, which has the max of my function, to be returned to the main function here. So I'll use return smax, And this was basically the function declaration. Now what I'll do is I'll write a code which says int value 1 is equal to 10, int value 2 is equal to 20, and I want to calculate the maximum of these values using my function myMax. So I'll say myMax and I'll give the values value 1 comma value 2. So I also want to see out my answer from this function. So for that I'll have to declare a variable, say my value is equal to 0. So the type of this variable should be the same as the type of my function, that is the type of the return variable that I'm using in my function. So smax is an integer, my function is an integer, so my function would work. If my smax was to be double or anything else, or say float, and my function was int, my function would do weird things. It would give an error and it won't work. So I've declared an int variable here named my value, and what I'll do here is I'll use my value to store the output from my max function. And at the end what I want to do is I want to see out my value, say my function value is my value and L. So before we run our code, what I want to show here is what I did here was I made my function, I declared and defined my function inside my main function. What would happen if I try to run it here? It would give an error. Let's run this first. And as I said, it would give an error. What C++ requires us to do is it requires us to declare a function outside the main function. So we'll start our main function after we have made our function here. So I made my function here, and then my main started and I used my function over here. Let's run this code now. And the output is my function value is 20, which was 20. Let's change the values to 330 and 1110. Let's run this code again. My function value is 1110. So always remember to make the function outside the main function here and to use it inside the main function. We can have as many variables as you want in our declaration, and we can use it over here. So what help this gives us is it does the computation, all this computation, for as many times as you want by just taking in the minimal information, which is these values. Another thing to see here is that my parameter values here were v1 and v2, whereas in my main my parameter values were value 1 and value 2, and my function worked. So it is not necessary to have the same parameter names in the declaration and in the at the part where you are calling the function. So this was it for functions. We will continue in the next lecture. Thank you.